cause of stress at work, as well as long hours and unfriendly colleagues. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Executive Career Coach Jenny Garrett and Deputy Editor for Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Good morning to you both. Jenny Garrett, so what is it that makes a job stressful?
Oh, I think a lot can, because actually we look to our manager to know what our day will be like, don't we? And I think if our manager comes in and looks really unhappy, we know we're not going to have a good day. If they come in, they've had a great weekend, we know we're going to have a good day. So I do think there's, how our manager behaves does completely impact how we experience our day and how we experience our work life.
Tom
Whether
Slater,
they have high demands can be a huge issue.
OK, Jenny Garrett, let's bring in Tom Slater on that. A manager sets the tone when it comes to stress or happiness in the workplace.
I just want to look at the kind of broader question here, because I think this obsession that we have with workplace stress is really quite bizarre. And this is not because I want to stick up for employers or for managers, but I want to stick up for employees. I think we're made of tougher stuff than that. Over the past 10 years or so, there's been this kind of constant talk of this stress epidemic in the workplace. And yet, if you look at some of the factors that you would assume would feed into that, for instance, being required to work long hours, etc., all of that's been on the decline. So I think really what I see this as part of is less about a real clear problem that needs to be tackled, and more just quite a commonplace idea these days that people are really kind of slightly less resilient, shall we say, unable to deal with the stresses and strains in life. And so we've kind of pathologised it. I don't think that's good for workers, and I don't really think that's good for anyone.
Well, we spend, Tom Slater, don't we, large amounts of our waking hours, the majority of our waking hours at work. It is hugely important how we feel, whether we feel valued, whether we feel supported in the workplace.
No, 100%, but I think where previously, if there was issues in the workplace, they would kind of be dealt with as a collective, kind of politically. If there's an issue with wages, how people are being treated, work-life balance, etc., that was something which people would come together and assertively try and challenge. Whereas nowadays it's talked about in a very kind of therapeutic fashion, as if all that people ever seem to want to be demanding is kind of more therapy sessions. I think that ultimately that's quite infantilising. Previously, if workers had problems, they would say, this is what we want. Now it's kind of people are being encouraged to say, this is how we feel, and I don't think that's necessarily a good shift.
So, Jenny Garrett, do we just need to toughen up and deal with it?
Absolutely not. I think resilience is really important, and I think the move to have resilience training and mindfulness is really important in the workplace. But actually, I think we are more stressed than we've ever been. We are completely asked to do so much more than we've ever been asked before. So many more demands, so much more change. There is no such thing as a job for life. We are at the whim of our organisations, and actually maybe it might not be reported that we're working more hours, but with the aid of technology and the 24/7 culture of emails and social media coming through, work doesn't stop for us, and there is no downtime. And I think it's increasingly more and more difficult and more stressful for people. And I think we maybe need to redefine the parameters of what work looks like, because when you get an email at midnight from your boss, do you respond? When you're working in a global organisation and you're dealing with US time and time in China and time in the UK, what are your hours? These things cause a lot of stress and ambiguity, and a lot feels out of control for employees. And I think they do need to talk about it, and I do think they do need to share their feelings. And I think these things are hugely important, particularly for our mental health.
Tom Slater, do we need that kind of cultural shift? France has introduced a policy where workers can say, I'm not checking my emails, I'm not going to be contactable outside of my contracted hours. Do we need to see that to ensure a better work-life balance, and would that therefore help with stress levels?
Well, I think there's 2 points there. I think, first of all, in terms of a cultural shift, I think we need to shift away from assuming that everyone is kind of always going to have a tough time with it, that they're not resilient enough to deal with these sorts of things. The thing about stress is there's really no one definition about it, because it is how people personally, subjectively respond. So I think a culture of resilience is good for making sure people don't feel stressed out. But on the second point about how you deal with problems as people find them in the workplace, issues with employers, all of that, of course, should be dealt with through industrial action, through collective action. I'm not against any of that. But my problem is that's political, that's assertive. It's not this kind of very therapeutic approach that we're hearing about. So if people want to fight for better conditions, they should definitely do that. What they shouldn't do is try and do that under the mantle that they're kind of put upon in some respectful way, because I don't think that's the reality that most people face, and I think that's actually alien to most people's experiences of work today.
Do you think, Tom Slater, though, that people are reluctant to actually talk about it, because to admit to feeling stressed at work can be seen as a sign of weakness?
Well, perhaps, but at the same time, I think that stress is really, in terms of the people who really can't cope because of work-life balance or in terms of the workload that they're being expected to deal with, is really quite small. I think what we're often seeing is just people having a bit of a tough time with it, the definition constantly being expanded. What I would like to see is a shift away from talking about issues in the workplace in these kind of therapeutic terms and back towards talking about them in political terms. What do people want? What conditions do people want to work? What sort of wages do they need? That, to me, seems to be much more positive, assertive than this kind of very therapeutic way in which we talk about it nowadays.
Are we bringing too much therapy into the workplace then? We need to get back to the basics and talk about the job and how that works?
I think there's a space for both of these, and it's not either or. I think industrialisation, unionisation of organisations can take place, but I think particularly in the private sector, that's much more challenging. I think in the public sector, yes, if you're a teacher, if you're a nurse, then actually you do come together and you do have your union. But increasingly in the private sector, that's much more difficult, and actually people are encouraged not to complain, not to come together, just to do their job and get on with it, and seen as weak when they're not able to cope. And I think creating a space where they can have these conversations, where they can create strategies, where they can build their resilience is really important. And to say this should not be happening, I think will take away a huge amount of support that could be there for them.
OK, Jenny, Garrett, Tom, Slater, thanks both very much indeed.